I have insurance, and so I don't need to focus on anything else other than just my physical well-being, because a bike is completely replaceable. And the fact that you have insurance and that you're protected and you're covered, all you need to do is focus on yourself and getting yourself better. Like, I'm going to try and I'm going to take risks and I'm going to take chances, because why else? Why would you not, right? I'm Alicia Speak. I'm 37. I'm a full-time lawyer, but I'm also a cyclist for Cycle Team London.
And welcome on stage a lovely bloke who's taken part in one of the most unorthodox race calendars in living memory, to be perfectly honest with you. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about his adventures on two wheels this year. We'll see how our chat goes. But please put your hands together for Mr. Lachlan Morton of EF Education First. All right, mate. As chilled out as ever. It's an absolute pleasure to speak to. We should have just piped in the feed from backstage.
Yeah, exactly.
We're waffling on about Land's End John O'Groats and stuff like that, weren't we?
Yeah.
Because, let's be honest, the EF Education First calendar this year is called the Alternative Calendar. And what did you rename it just at the back there?
The additional calendar.
The additional calendar. Because you're blending both, road riding at World Tour level and doing all this adventure stuff. But we knew that things were going to change a little bit with the direction that Rafa and EF were going to take at the back end of last season. And you clearly were one of the members of the team that automatically was going to go, it's going to fit. So were you quite excited when those discussions first started taking place?
Yeah, I sort of came at it from the Rafa side of things. And they had a lot of plans to sort of implement an alternate, I guess, approach to professional cycling. And I just immediately put my hand up and was like, that's something I want to do. At the time, I didn't think any World Tour team would take it. So I was prepared to go and race wherever just to make it happen. And then EF came on board and it was like, dream come true, because that's something I never thought I would get the chance to do, like race at the highest level, while doing the sort of, I guess, adventure stuff that really was what brought me back in love with the sport, I guess. So to combine them under one team has been a dream.
Because when you look at your career path, World Tour, back down to Conti, back up to World Tour again, and adventure riding with your brother in between, as you just said, for this to have landed on your doorstep, it must have been amazing. You thought, God, this you couldn't really make it up, could you?
Yeah, exactly. I manifested it. It's really like the dream scenario. So I definitely have to pinch myself. And the way it's come together so well. Like over the course of the season, that it's a real dream come true.
So before we look in a bit more detail about GB Duro, Three Peaks and Dirty Kansas and the rest of the season, reflecting back now at this point, and because let's be honest, there's been a lot of people that have loved it and embraced it, and there's been a few conservatives who've thought this really hasn't got a place in World Tour. We think it's a bit stupid. Why are we doing it? How do you look at it now? Clearly, you've had a great season. You're exhausted mentally and physically, but it looks like you've had a dream. Yeah. So what are your thoughts stepping away and looking at it as a proposition for moving forward for the business model of cycling?
I think the thing with cycling is there's so much tradition involved, right? Which is what, that's a big reason I fell in love with the sport.
Yeah.
But there's also part of that holds us back as a sport. So I think looking at what we're trying to do with the alternate calendar, we've gone way out there, like going to do ultra races in the middle of the season. Like, World Tour teams are never going to jump onto that.
Yeah.
But it's more about sparking the idea that, okay, people are jumping on this, people are interested in this, why? And what can we take from like these events and put into World Tour cycling to make it more relevant. So I think, ultimately the idea is not going to be like, I hope 10 World Tour teams send 8 guys to Dirty Kansas and kick everyone's ass. Like, no one wants that, But maybe it's like, okay, let's look at why Kansas is such a great cycling event and what can we learn from them. And I think there's things with like participation. It's exciting. It's a new format. So I think, for me, it's like that's what I would like to see. It's like, let's adopt things from those races, as opposed to going there and trying to dominate them, I guess.
Yeah, because you've got to strike a balance, haven't you? Like I said, if a load of, there are other riders who do stuff like this individually, like Peter Stettiner of Trek was over at Dirty Kansas and podium, didn't he?
Yeah.
So there are a few individuals doing it, but you've got to, what you don't want to do is upset a pre-existing community and just kind of wade on in and, like you say, it's about striking a balance and kind of learning, isn't it, really, I guess?
Yeah, and we didn't want to take World Tour cycling and impose it on these like grassroots events. It was more like, can we be involved?
Yeah.
The other thing is, it's like, if you look at something like GB Duro and you talk about the tradition of cycling, I think, the GB Duro is a lot closer to the first Tour de France than the current Tour de France is to the first Tour de France.
When there were like 300-400k stages, the first tours were just basically around France, pretty much on your own. You weren't allowed any kind of support.
Yeah, and it was more about survival and capturing people's imagination just through crazy feats, as opposed to what we have now, which is still great. But it's nice to get back to that sort of grass.
Literally grassroots as well.
Yeah,
literally you sleeping in a hedge, grassroots
exactly.
level.
Yeah.
In Bristol. In the dark. So we'll touch on that in a minute, but let's talk about GB Duro first up then, because 2000k.
Yeah.
Lands John O'Groats, but not the quick route, because the quickest route is about 860, isn't it, give or take a few miles.
Yeah.
So basically kind of double the normal distance going in through national parks, etc., and using Instagram as a marker point, as a checkpoint, just taking photos of where you are. That's basically the premise of it.
Yeah.
So what was that like in a nutshell? Because it looked, if everybody's not seen it, and I'm sure if you're here you've seen the video, but if you haven't, please check it out. It's a wonderful video, but it's just intriguing, and it kind of sparks that spirit of adventure, which is why we all got on our bikes in the first place, isn't it?
Yeah, for me, ultimately it was life-changing, which is something I've never had come out of a bike race, I don't think. But going into it, like now knowing like how epic it was, I was so underprepared.
You were quite full of trepidation, weren't you? You were.
It was really like, I had that moment I woke up like of the day to go, and I was like, holy shit, what have I done? And then about 10Ks in, we were like jumping over fences and walking, and like I was like, this is going to take forever. And then I was chatting to the next guy, and he's like, yeah, I'm not going to sleep, I'm just going to push all the way through. And I was like, oh Christ, here we go. But so it was a really steep learning curve.
Yeah.
And I basically went through the lowest of lows during the second stage, and spent like 10 minutes just crying, sitting in a ditch, and like in the rain, just like, what the hell am I doing? And then I came out the other side of that, and then I proceeded to have like the most amazing 3 days of riding that I've ever had. So yeah, it was a huge challenge, but it's definitely, I think, the coolest thing I've ever done.
So how many days did you do it in again? What was the actual time scale? Because you had to finish by the 4th, didn't you?
Yeah.
But you could.
I did it in about a week, 6 days or so.
2,000 Ks, and a lot of it off-road in a week.
Yeah, and it's split into 4 stages.
So seriously, I thought it was a couple of weeks. I didn't realize it was a week. Oh my God, right. Okay.
So the first stage was 650K.
No wonder you were filled with trepidation. Yeah. Oh my God.
But the 650K doesn't tell the story. It's like, you have to see it to believe it. So I think that was 30 or just over 30 hours. And I didn't sleep on that one. I just
straight through.
Just went through.
And stopping in random like little kind of shops and
yeah,
garages.
Yeah. I only stopped like twice because the other thing is the route is it basically goes out of its way to avoid any sort of town.
Right. Where are all the garages?
Yeah. So I started and I didn't have any food. And I was like, I'll see something. It's the UK. There's 200k of riding, and I found anywhere.
There's a really cool bit at the start of the video where is it your girlfriend saying, "Have you packed yet?" The night before, no, I'll pack in the morning. It's like
it's a daunting thing to pack for. Like, where do you start? Yeah, so it was difficult in that regard. Like, I mean, I wasn't well researched. So I didn't know where the stops were coming. So I got myself into trouble a few times for like running out of food and stuff. But yeah, I didn't stop much the first day. The next time I planned to sleep in Manchester. I think the stage was 450 or 480. And I got to Manchester and I was like, I feel great. It was like 10 o'clock, had a beer, and then was just like, I'm going to push on. And then about 100 k's later when it was 3 in the morning and I was in the middle of nowhere, like walking up hills, I was like, what the fuck have I done? So yeah, I threw out the bivvy and it was dark, so I just like, there was a sort of like a stone hedge, I just threw the bivvy over, jumped in, fully clothed, helmet on, just like went to sleep. And then when I woke up, it was maybe like an hour and a half later, I realised I was in someone's front lawn. So I was like, oh, all right, packed up, got out of there. And so yeah, I slept a little bit that time. The next stage, again, similar distance, but I slept in a park. And when I woke up, I was covered in like those, I don't know, they got big slugs here.
Yeah, we do have big slugs in the UK, yeah.
Because where I camped was like, it was a bit damp on the ground. But my thought was like, well, no one will come down here. You know, like we were speaking about earlier, the only predator in the UK is people.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was like, no one will come down this little alley, but it's like, it is damp, and I woke up covered in slugs. And then like,
apparently it's a good form of nutrition though.
But yeah, I mean, it was a nice format at the end of each stage. I could like find a pub to sleep in or something.
Yeah.
And like have a shower. But during the stages, it was sort of like I don't know. I found it easier if you just kept moving.
Yeah, and you built up a bit of a kind of following along the way. I mean, the support. People came out, obviously saw you, via social media, via Instagram primarily, and kind of joined you for parts of the ride, which is.
Yeah,
I guess that
crazy.
Was really. I'd imagine that helped massively. Just have a bit of companionship because
totally.
When you're out almost going crazy. To have something to ride with, the time just passes a little bit easier and stuff like that, doesn't it, I guess?
Yeah, and it sort of started to happen right around when I was, like, questioning myself, like, what am I doing this for? Like, what's my purpose? Because for me anyway, in those ultra races, that's like, you've got to have a very sure reason for why you're doing it and understand why you're doing it, because otherwise, like, that question will crack you.
Yeah.
And right at that moment when I was sort of really questioning what I was doing, that's when, the dot watchers started coming out and riding. And to start with, it was sort of like one guy here, one guy there, or like someone standing on the side of the road.
Yeah.
And then at one point, we had like a bunch. There was, it was like Forrest Gump, everyone kept coming out. So yeah, no, that was really incredible.
Yeah.
And then once we got to Scotland, that sort of like dissipated out again.
You're talking about, you obviously don't know the UK most, but how bleak it kind of was. And obviously the fact that the route took you, bypassed any kind of inhabited areas.
Yeah.
And heading into Scotland, I mean, it's pretty, it's beautiful, but desolate, isn't it?
Yeah. I was really blown away just by how isolated it felt. But the riding, like here in the UK, really blew me away.
Yeah.
Because to be honest, before that, I never would have been like, yeah, I'll pack my bike up and jump in a plane, go to the UK for a bike trip. Like,
We've ridden the Tour of Britain before, haven't you? Actually.
Yeah,
Back
years ago.
Yeah.
Years ago.
Victoria, yeah.
But yeah, I was absolutely blown away. It's like absolutely world class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And before we move on to the other couple of events, what was it like to finally get to John O'Groats?
It was huge.
Yeah.
The crazy thing is that, like, the last stage was still 300k, but I was like, oh, it's in the bag.
Okay.
Like I stopped halfway at like a pub, had lunch, and it felt like, when you'd like go on a ride, stop at the cafe, then you got like the 10k's home. But that 10k was 200. But I had that
proportionally was 10k to like 2,000, wasn't it?
Exactly. So I had like a whole 200k to like process it, which was amazing. It sort of took me back through my whole involvement with cycling, and it felt like that was just a culmination of all my experiences on the bike put into like one performance, I guess.
That's amazing. So, and it's kind of cheesy to say that, would it be fair? It's almost like a spiritual kind of, ride as well,
100%.
especially when you're, solitude makes you think in different ways, isn't it? So it sounds like it was quite a special 6 days for you.
Yeah. It really opened my head like even further as to what you can get out of riding a bike.
Yeah. So, Dirty Kansas.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, in terms of the order of events,
Kansas we did first.
Kansas you did first, okay,
Yeah.
and then you managed to somehow along the way win a stage of the Tour of Utah as well.
Yeah.
So when did Utah fit in? Because that's what
Utah,
I'm intrigued by that.
Yeah, Utah came after GB Duro.
Right.
So
how long?
About a month.
Okay. So you obviously got good condition. Clearly, you had an
I was
engine
pretty
there.
fit.
Yeah. But
I think I got because they can now with like data that they can quantify the load.
Okay.
So I basically got the whole of like what I got out of the Vuelta in like 5 days, as far as like load goes. So yeah, I was pretty fit. Actually, I think a lot of like the coaches and people involved with the team just saw that and were like, oh, he's done. Like that's season over. So I kind of felt not pressure, but like I wanted to go out there and be like, I can do these 2 things.
Yeah.
And
well, ultimately, it's quite important to kind of show that, because otherwise it's a big gamble. You can't just suddenly go and do those sorts of activities and not race your bike.
And
but
also
it has to work.
The concept of the alternate calendar, there's a little bit on me to like prove that concept, because it's one thing to go and do, GB Duro, but then if you don't show up for the rest of the year, like
it's kind of falling flat.
Exactly, it's like I will do that one time. So yeah, I immediately after GB Duro, I went to Vietnam for a week, just
as you do,
complicate things.
Yeah.
And then went back to Colorado and was like, okay, I want to try and do something at Utah.
Right.
And I trained hard, and I actually felt remarkably good after the GB Duro.
Yeah.
Once I'd caught up on a bit of sleep and let the trench foot go away, and then I was okay. And we did Leadville the day before Utah started, which also complicated things massively.
Yeah, I'd imagine so.
Because then we had to stay in Colorado, drive overnight, and start the Tour of Utah. So we made it difficult for ourselves. But yeah, the stage there I really, really wanted to win. And it was just one of those days when I was like, this one's not going to get away from me.
Right.
And I won in a sprint, which never happened.
It's like a slow motion. It's up a drag, wasn't it? You had one guy with you.
Yeah.
And he closed to within like this much on the line.
Yeah, I raised it in big time. I saw the finish before, and it's like it was one of those ones where the barricades basically dictate what the road is.
Yeah.
And it had like a strange curve in it. I was like, if I'm in the front and just straight line this, like whoever's behind will have a very hard time getting around before the finish.
And that must have been quite, as well as it's always wonderful to win a bike race, but it was quite redemptive, really. And like, do you know what? That you can do this, but that must have been I mean, special on its own, but to combine it with what you'd done beforehand and what was going to come afterwards as well.
Yeah.
I mean, there must have been a real sense of kind of like achievement and kind of pride there, really.
Yeah, and I don't know why. I was always like confident that you could do both, and that like I could go out there and race road as well. But I don't know where that confidence came from because it had like.
Is it because you're just such a relaxed guy? Is it because you're a bit of a chiller, aren't you? Let's be honest.
Yeah,
you know,
I guess. But with the director we had there, Fabrizio, he's a great guy, but he's very old school.
Okay.
And like old school European director, and I could tell from like the second I was there, I was kind of like he was sort of treating me as like I was a bit of a gimmick. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like, he's gone and done these funny races, and like now we'll let him do one of these. So to win there and then see him, like, it was like I could see it click in his head.
Okay,
and I was like,
cool.
okay, if the old school European director gets it, then like that's what we're going for.
That's brilliant. Well, actually, looking at timings, let's talk about the Three Peaks.
Yeah.
Because that came last. Isn't it? Yeah, that was the last one, which is an iconic event. 61 miles, isn't it?
Yeah.
61 or 61 Ks.
I think 61K.
61 Ks. Nick Craig, I don't know if he's in the audience actually. He might be upstairs on the Scott stand. But obviously, an iconic rider has kind of dominated that. You went into that having not spent hardly any time on your cyclocross bike, and I know that in the lead-in you thought, well, there's a bit of road on the run into the event, then there's a climb. So you kind of mimicked as a warm-up. Was it the day before or 2 days before?
I was in Colorado the week before.
Yeah.
And I basically tried to put together my own version of what the Three Peaks would be. And then when I turned up, like, in Yorkshire and saw where it was, I was like, well, that was a huge failure. This is absolutely nothing like Colorado. So the only thing I really got out of it was I learned how to shoulder a bike properly.
So you self-taught?
Yeah, I just started riding up the hill with a bike, and this lady actually passed me, and she was like, she rode past and then she kind of stopped and looked back and she was like, I think you'll find it a lot easier if you do it this way.
Seriously?
Yeah, and she showed me and I was like, oh, that feels great. I can finally run.
The cycling community is wonderful, isn't it? Everyone wants to help each other out, don't they?
Exactly. So yeah, I really didn't have any idea what I was doing. And you can't really see the course because a lot of it's private land.
Yeah.
So we got an idea before of what it would look like, but it was just like basically a gun went off and then it's like go for it.
Yeah.
And it was a really awesome experience.
And you were fourth.
Yeah.
You were fourth, just off the podium, weren't you?
Yeah, I had to rely on the last peak. It's at Pennygent, I think. There's a lot of rideable sections, so I came from 11th to 4th on the last hill. Because I made the huge mistake of trying to follow Rob Jebb, who I didn't realise is an incredible fell runner as well.
Yeah.
And I followed him halfway up the first Simon Fell, and I was running like, this is fine. Like, I feel good. And then all of a sudden I was like, I can't breathe. Running is hard, and then like proceeded to walk, and then lost all these places and came back. But yeah, that's a really cool race. Like, there's nothing like that out there, I don't think.
Would you go back?
I'd love to go back. Yeah. I really hope next year I can get back.
What's the hardest part of the Three Peaks for you then? Was it the technical element? Because clearly you've got the engine there. And when you can lay down the power, that's when you come into your own. But when it's more technical, that's when I think
it's a lot about just knowing the area, which is a lot I really like about the races. It's so attached to the physical location. So it's a lot about knowing this little line here or this little shortcut here. And then also like the way you're on a cross bike and you've got the tyres pumped up way too hard.
Did anybody give you any advice on that side of things?
Yeah, little bits, but it's always like don't give them too much. I think. So yeah, you got like 60 or 70 psi in your tyres, and it's like wet stone, and you'd rather be on a dual suspension mountain bike. So you kind of just hanging on for dear life and just pointing the bike downhill. I think that for me was the hardest bit to get my head around, and the speeds that these guys were doing it at. mind-blowing.
That is amazing. So what have you got on your bucket list going forwards then? Is it to do this sort of thing again, or other kind of things on the horizon, like maybe Taiwan Challenge or something like that? Because there are so many, different cool events that just fall outside of what's considered kind of normal out there, and there's an increasing amount as well. And it's actually quite exciting.
I mean, the thing is, once you scratch the surface of it, you realize just how much is out there. Like, there's so many different races I'd really love to do. At the moment, like, I think the Tour Divide really captures my, imagination, which is it's a unsupported mountain bike race from the Canadian border to Mexico, along the Rockies.
Wow. Okay.
Which is like,
How long is that going to take?
I think it takes the winners around 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Mike Hall has the record.
Right. Okay.
And I'd love to go and do that. Also, the Silk Mountain Road Race is another one that just really seems like it'd be cool.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot out there.
And what about the rest of the guys in the team? I know you rode with Taylor Phinney.
Yeah.
And Mr. House, obviously the American road champion in Dirty Kansas, didn't you? So how have the rest of the team kind of adopted or kind of got to grips with this new kind of outlook for the team? Because it is, it's something you're going to continue doing, isn't it?
Yeah. I think initially it was a hard sell for a lot of guys, because they're like, why would I risk what I'm doing on the road by going to do Kansas or
And when you say risk, there is a tangible risk in it. I mean, you're out on your own.
Yeah.
Rocky terrain, bears.
I mean, I think anyone who's done the last 20K of a World Tour race, they're like, that's real risk.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, Alex, he had an amazing time doing it. Taylor had such a great time. That's all he's going to do now.
Yep.
But yeah, I think like initially everyone's like, oh, that's crazy. But going to do like GB Duro really helped because it made Kansas seem like it's the easy option.
Yeah.
So now there's like a few guys with their hands in the air being like, oh yeah, I'd like to go do Kansas. And I think seeing that like, it wasn't the death of me. Like I came back out and still rode a road bike afterwards. Helped. So I think like slowly there's going to be more and more guys coming out, which would be great.
Yeah. And what would you say then, just going back to the traditionalists who've got a bit of a kind of problem with this, what would you say to them in terms of why is it such a good thing to you? I mean, why do you think that doing something like this is actually important for cycling?
I mean, I think like bikes and your relationship with riding is different for each person. And within road cycling, like my initial experience, there's like a right way to do it.
Yeah.
You dress like this, you train like this, and then you race like this.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, sure, if that's the way you want to race and ride, that's great. But it shouldn't be enforced on everyone. Everyone's entitled to have their own relationship with cycling.
Yeah.
And it can span across road cycling and mountain biking and gravel racing. It can be all those things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, my idea, I'm not trying to, change road cycling. I'm just trying to bring, all the great things about all the different forms of cycling together.
Yeah.
So
that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, don't feel threatened. It's just it's a good thing.
There you go. Well, you're going to be hanging around for a bit longer. You're going to be on the Cannondale stand.
Yeah.
Just for the next sort of 20 minutes, half an hour. So go and say hi, have a chat. He's the most interesting guys I've ever met. It's an absolute pleasure. I really hope you've enjoyed it. We could have spoken on and on and on. Unfortunately, that time has run out. But for the time being, please put your hands together one more time for Mr. Lachlan Morton.
Thanks, man.